Hi, this is John from FlatCatGear, and today I'm going to be talking about steam baking. I'm going to talk about steam baking because I had a couple of questions from customers, and it got me to realize that they didn't quite have a clear concept of what steam baking is and what it does. So I'm making this video to go a little bit more into detail about it, and additionally I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of more steam baking recipes. So what steam baking does, what you do is you typically take a pot, you put a little bit of water in it, and you put a secondary pot in it. Now what you want to do is you want to make sure that the pot that you're going to be baking in does not rest on the water. And I'll explain that in a minute. So you want to be able to space it off above the pot, and you want to add water below that level so it doesn't touch. So how steam baking works is you have a pot and it's got a little bit of water in it. You apply heat, the water gets up to the boiling point, and once it gets up to that point, then it starts producing steam. So it takes a tremendous amount of energy to turn water from a liquid to a gas, and steam is invisible. What happens is you throw all that energy in to make the water boil, turn into a gas, and then when the gas, the steam, hits the cooler pot, it condenses. When it condenses, it gives off that energy back to this pot. The water condenses and it drips back down in the pot. And that's why it's important that you want to have a spacer to keep what you're baking off the water. If it's touching the water, then you're not going to get the steam is going to be delayed because the water is going to start heating up. Then the water has to heat up this pan. And that's not what you want to do. You want to make sure there's a gap. You make sure there's a gap so when the pot's here, the water's boiling below, it is generating steam, the steam is condensing on the pan, and then it's condensing, forming water, dripping back down, heating up, and this process goes over and over and over. And that's how you get the heat transfer into this pan for your steam baking. So for today's demo, I'm going to do a real simple recipe. It's basically a straight up bread that we're going to steam, and for lunch, we're going to make Asian tacos. For steam baking, I'm using the Bobcat system. I'm going to bring the water up to a boil using a FlatCat standard stove. After it reaches a boil, I'm going to be adding the simmering to slow down the boiling rate. For the tacos are basically a bread dough recipe. And what I've done is I've added a little sugar to it. I've also added some green onions and some sesame seeds. They're fairly flat. They're about less than 1/4 of an inch thick. I've placed them on parchment paper. One of the things I'm also doing is I'm steaming them on this tray. The tray that you're going to see is the strainer from a Kmart grease pot. It's a pretty neat size, so that's what we're going to use. So this only took about 5 minutes to steam. Note that the standoff is well above the water, so it never touches the pan. And pop the second one in right in there. So 3 are done cooking, and the 4th one is still in the steamer, so all we have to do is assemble them. So I did steam this on parchment paper. So our fillings, we're using teriyaki beef jerky. Now the trick to this, the best tenderizer in the world is a sharp knife. So cut thin strips. I'm adding some carrots. And some hot sauce. Two Asian tacos. Steam baking is actually the fastest way to transfer heat into food. In fact, before microwaves, that is one of the ways people used to reheat food was by using steam. Steaming is the fastest way to make bread. Keep in mind there are two things. Number one, for bread to solidify, the internal temperature has to get above 180 degrees. The second thing is when you're steam baking, you will not form a crust. To form a crust, you need to caramelize the sugars in the flour, and that means you have to get up to a temperature of at least 325 degrees F. Since water boils at 212, you're never going to get a crust, but you will cook bread fast. Thanks for joining us. Come visit us at www.FlatCatGear.com.